just the first few verses of chapter 2, and we learned that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was seriously upset with the Jewish approach to the conquest of the Holy Land, which had been neglected. After the death of Yoshua, the people, even the tribe of Yehuda, tribe of Binyamin, Zevulun, Asher, Naphtali, each one, in its own way, had come to terms with the fact that they weren't taking control of the land completely. It was under their jurisdiction, right? But it didn't annihilate the Canaanites, didn't throw them out. Sometimes they made them pay taxes, sometimes they didn't do that, sometimes they lived amongst the Canaanites. And at one point we said they even came to a peace treaty, right? A two-state solution. That was the Gavul, the border between the Jews. This is the border, you live here, we live here, right? And they come to terms with that. At that point, God sent a prophet to in his name speak to the Jews and tell them that he planned that everything would be great between them, they'd have this great relationship, the Jews and God, and but that was on condition that when they come to the land, it's their land, and they eradicate the Canaanite pagans in the land so that they can then build their society and their beautiful country on their own without the interference of these Canaanites. Because God knew that if you leave these people around, then instead of you influencing them, they're going to influence you. Once you have a strong society, a strong country, a strong commerce, strong education, everything's great, then you can start spreading the light to the rest of the nations, which is the Jew's job, right? As a prophet says, to be a light unto the nations. But don't do that by intermarriage. That's not how it works, right? It works by building your own society strong, and then you can influence others. Otherwise, what happens is exactly the opposite. And that's exactly what happened, and that's what God was upset with them. And then they all burst out crying, and some type of teshuvah, I don't know how serious it was, but at least momentarily, there was a awakening of remorse at what they'd done. Okay? And that's what we got up to. Pasuk 1. Vayishalach. Now, I think it's clear to anyone who reads this that this next section is out of place. Because Yeshua isn't alive. Right, Yeshua already died in chapter 1, verse 1. It says, and it was after the death of Yoshua. Right? So it's clear. There's something out of order here. It's not even necessary for the author to write that. Obviously, Yeshua wasn't resurrected. It doesn't mean that. It means I'm now about to summarize something. For the purpose of the summary, I have to go back a little bit in the story. Okay? It's sort of to give a bit of background to what was going on. This is a new book. The beginning of this book is opening with the fact that the Jews started to continue the conquest. They started to continue the conquest after Joshua's death, but didn't really do it properly, right? So, and the prophet came and told them, gave them over the head for it. Now, let's give it, as an introduction to the continuation of the story, we have to go back a bit in the story. So let's go back. What are we going back? That towards the end of the book of Yeshua made a big gathering of the people. Big gathering, and he told them, he encouraged them to keep the Torah properly, and after he dies, that they should continue the conquest. This is what he told them to do. And then he sent everyone home. That's where it's continuing. Vayishalach Yeshua es ha'am. Yeshua sent the people. The people means the people who had come to that gathering. You have to go back to the book of Joshua to see that. Chapter 23, I think it is. Vayelchu b'nei Yisrael, and the children of Israel went, ish lenachalosai, each one to his inheritance, lareshesh es ha'aretz, to inherit the land. And we've had these words, similar words, lahorish and lareshet. They seem to have the same root, but they don't really mean the same thing. They're from the same idea, but the hey means to do to somebody else. Lilbosh means to dress. Lehalbish means to dress somebody else. Right? Lehitabish means to get yourself dressed. But if you don't use either, you can't tell. Right? Lehitlabesh means to get yourself dressed. Lehalbish means to put clothes on somebody else. Lilbosh just means to dress. You don't know who you're doing it to. You can only do one of the two, so somebody else you right? But it's not being clear in that in Hook. So Lareshet means to take an inheritance, a Yerusha. Lehorish doesn't mean to give somebody else an inheritance, right? Here it means to drive somebody else out of his inheritance and take it for yourself. Okay, so that's what the word was used in the context up to now. They didn't drive out the people. They did drive out the people. That's the word used. Here the word is actually without the haste. Rather, it means to take as an inheritance. Right? We're not talking about driving somebody else out. Well, it says each one went to his inheritance. Each one the nachalato, to his tribal unit, that's the nachala, lareshet et haaretz, to take the land as an inheritance. That's where they left Yeshua, with the intention to do that. Each one would go in his army, eventually would fight and take it. Vayavdu aves Hashem, and the people worship God. Kol Yemei Yeshua, all the life as Yeshua was, they were faithful to the Torah. What does that mean, faith? What does it mean to serve God? They kept Shabbos and Kashrus and didn't talk Lashon Hara, and whatever they're supposed to do, Jews are supposed to do. No, not just after Yeshua. V'chol Yemei Hazikenim, on all the days of the elders, she'erichu yamim, who lived erichu long life, like the word aroch, which is long. Acharei Yeshua, after Yeshua died. I think you have to appreciate that most of the elders were much younger than Yeshua. Why? Because all the Jews died in the desert. Anyone who left Egypt was 20 and over when they left Egypt, died in the desert. So anyone who was old died. Only youngsters, people that could be, they were already 59 by the time they came into the land of Israel. Because those who were 19 when they left Egypt, so 40 years later they were 59, right? But anyone over that age was dead. The only people who were still alive were Yeshua and Caleb.
Spies.
Those were the two spies, right, who were still alive. So Yeshua, when he was 110, there was a big gap between him and the next generation of elders. That's what it says, those who lived a long time after Yeshua. Because a person who died 110 was actually not 10 years later or 5 years later, it was 40 years later by the time the next generation died. Yes?
What's the age difference between him and Moshe, Yeshua and Moshe?
Moshe Rabbeinu died when he was 120, and Yeshua died 30 years later when he was 110. So it was a 40-year... No. Yeah, that's the difference. Moshe Rabbeinu died at the end of the desert, right? So there was like a 40-year difference between them. Okay? All right. So all those elders who lived a long time after Yeshua, again, it doesn't mean they were much older than him when they died. It must mean they were much younger than him when he died. Okay? Ashero, who had seen, these people had seen. What had they seen? As Kol Maaseh Hashem HaGadol, all the acts of the great God. Asher also saw that he had done to Israel. How had they seen the things that had done to Israel? Because they'd all left Egypt. All those 19-year-olds all remembered Pharaoh and the servitude and the plague and the crossing of the Red Sea and the Ma'amad Har Sinai. They saw all of this. They were still alive. And they lived many, many years after Yeshua died. They lived another 40 years after Yeshua died. Maybe even longer. Yeshua died 110. That's youngster. Moshe Rabbeinu died at 120, right? So it could be 50, 60 years. And all during that period, the people would still behave. They still served God. It's one thing they didn't do. What didn't they do? Drive out the Canaanites, right? That was the one thing they didn't do, right? But that's already an old story. But besides that, they were still from. Okay? That's what he's trying to say. They kept the word of God during the life of Yeshua, during the life of all those people who had first-hand evidence to the extent no one could say, you don't believe in God. You don't believe in God, you're crazy. I was there, I have seen it, I saw him. I didn't have to go to some type of discovery program to bring proofs of God. I was there, my own eyes, I saw it, right? So that's what he's saying. Those people who actually saw with their own eyes the acts of God of the crossing of the Red Sea, during their lifetime, people didn't need their belief in God strengthening greatly. Yamas Yeshua, then Yeshua died. Eved Hashem, the servant of God. But Me'av Eseshonim, when he was 110 years old. And they buried him bigvul nachalato, in the borders of his inheritance. Means he had a plot of land, they buried him there. That was done in those days. They didn't take people to graveyards. Every family had a section in their plot of land, in their property, and there was probably a graveyard there for grandpa and uncle this and uncle, but in their own thing. Okay, that's where he was buried. Where was it? Timnat Cheres. That's the name of the place where he lived. Lahar Ephraim, in the mountains of Ephraim. Mitzvon Lahar Gaash. Tzafon means north. I forgot to tell you last time. We talked about the different directions of the compass, how in Hebrew there are two names for each direction. There's the Yam and Ma'arav. Kedem, Mizrach. Darom, Negev. There's only one side that has one name, which is Tzafon. There's no other name for Tzafon. Okay? Now, I didn't explain to you last time why I think the word tzafon is called tzafon. Do you remember? And what does the word tzafon mean in Hebrew? Anyone know? Besides north, what does it mean? It means hidden.
Wow.
How do I know? Because you say on Seder night, Kadesh, Urchat, Karpas, Yachad, Magiroch, Hamazimata, right? Baruch Halel, Tzafon Nirtza. What's Tzafon? When you look for the Afikoman. Because the Afikoman is being hidden. Tzafon means hidden. I didn't need to prove it from there, but there's other ways to prove it. The word tzafon means hidden. So why do you think the north is called hidden? That's where God hides the sun at night time. Right?
Really?
Well, where does the sun go at night time? In the morning, it rises in the east. In the midday, it's in the south. And it sets in the west. And where does it go at night? It goes to the north. In the north, not to mind you guys from the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere.
Come on.
Right? In the northern hemisphere.
It goes
Right?
from east to west. Doesn't go south or north.
First of all, it's a pasuk in Keheles and it goes to the south. You look at, well, how would you know in geography? The sun and sun in midday is in the south.
Okay.
If you're at the equator, it goes right over the top. But who lives at the equator? If you don't live in the equator, the vast majority of mankind lives north of the equator.
So the sun's not moving. We're moving.
Doesn't make any difference. But in the sky, right? The sun in the sky is seen in the south, right? It's Parsha, right?
I believe you.
Okay, so if it goes like, no, at night time it's at north, right? I remember the first geography class we had in school where I was 11, the geography teacher said, if you ever see the sun in the north, then phone the Manchester newspaper to tell them, right? In the northern hemisphere, you never see the sun in the north. It's always in the south or in the west and east. So that's because the sun is hidden on the north. That's why the north is called Safon. That's my opinion. I've no idea, but to me it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. You'd have to say that God manufactured the Hebrew language for the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, you wouldn't call it that, right? Because on the contrary, you only see the sun in the south and not in the southern hemisphere, right? Australians.
Southern atmosphere.
No, we see the north.
You see in the north, right? Right. Oh,
Yeah.
right. You don't see in the north.
But it rises in.
So it still rises on the east. No. You have to get yourself. It's all disorientated because it looks completely wrong. My daughter lived in Chile for a while, and she sent me a screenshot of a computer program that I sent her to use. It was a computer program called Stellarium, which tells you the sky, where it is that you've used it, at any moment in history, right? Or now, and what's going on in the sky, right? And she sent it, and I was completely disoriented. I didn't know what was going on. It's wrong. There's something wrong here. Until I realized that in Chile, the sun is on the other side of the sky. So the whole thing was the wrong way. It was the wrong way around. Right? And then I was, wow, it's the southern hemisphere, so it's the other way around.
Wait, you tell us again something in the Mishnah class.
Yeah, in Rosh Hashanah it was. Yeah.
What was it again about the moon or
The
something?
moon
Right.
never faces the sun.
Right.
Right, and then
the question is whether it can be north or south.
And then makes
If it made sense, if the witnesses had seen in the southern hemisphere, it would be the other way. It's very unlikely they came from there, but it's possible. That's why I didn't say, oh, correct, we talked about it then. Okay, let's continue. So now, what is Har Gosh? Anyone know what the word Har Gosh means? A volcano, very good. How do you know that? Right, he's got Israeli parents? A Har Gosh is a volcano. Gosh means to shake, to erupt. That's what Gosh is. Erupt. So Har Gosh, now, it doesn't have to be here there was a volcano, but that's what the word means. No. He was buried in Timnat Serach in the mountain of Ephraim, north of Mount Gosh. So the place where Yeshua was buried is north of a volcano, it would seem. Now, no geologists have discovered volcanoes in the mountains of Ephraim. There are volcanoes in the north of Israel, right? Har Bental, which is in the Golan, right? You just see on the ground, the rocks there are these big black rocks.
Isn't
right?
that a friend though in the Golan?
No, that's Menashe. That's Menashe. Ephraim is Shomron, right?
No,
So
there's no volcano in Shemot.
So you said there's no volcano, right? I also would have thought that, but until something erupts, maybe there's a dormant volcano that no one's discovered yet. It's only some green, verdant, nice.
The Golan itself was known as like a land of fire, right? Because there was a volcano there.
I don't think about fire, but no idea. I don't know why the Golan was called the Golan of Fire. But anyway, this is as far as I know, the only place where the word volcano appears. Whether it really was a volcano or not, I have no idea. Anyway, he was buried north of a volcano. Right. V'gam kol hadorahu. And all that generation means besides Yoshua, not only did Yoshua die, but all his generation means all the generation who were much younger than him, we mentioned. There was nobody else in his generation besides Kalev. So it means that the elders who were leading the people with him, although they were much younger. The Gam also kol hadorahu ne'esfu el avosav. They were ne'esfu, gathered to their fathers. That's a nice way of saying died. That's how you say in Hebrew. To be gathered to your ancestors. What? Avotav, his fathers, his ancestors. So that next generation, really the generation which is in a way the same generation with the next generation.
Kalev died as well. Then,
I guess so. Yeah, right. But you wouldn't just say Kalev's death is that generation, right? There's just one more person.
Yeah.
So it must be including not just Kalev, also all the elders of we would call them the next generation because they were at least 40 years younger. Yokam dar acher achareim, another generation got up achareihem, after them. Notice the two words. Acher means another. Achar means after. It's not the same word. Acher, another. Achar, after. Okay? Now here both words are mentioned. Another generation got up after them. And what happened? Asher lo yadu es Hashem. They didn't know God. They also didn't know the deeds that God had done to Israel. I mean, they didn't know it firsthand. They may have heard it at Seder night, right? They heard it in school, but they didn't know it. Know it in the sense of 5-finger knowledge. That's what Merch used to say. 5-finger clarity. They heard it. Did they believe it? They didn't even, there was no one alive who could say that they'd seen it.
Like they didn't taste God.
So, but what does it mean? They didn't know God and they didn't know the actions of God.
Yeah.
They didn't know God, maybe talking about Mount Sinai.
Oh, that's what I thought. That's what I think as well. It's talking about Mount Sinai. Means there's sort of two parts of the story. There's the Exodus, which are the actions of God, crossing the Red Sea, the plagues, wiping out the Egyptians, the man in the desert, and there's also the actual knowing God, right? Even in a biblical sense, that know means have a very, very intimate relationship, right? The knowledge of God, that intimate relationship with God, we married God, so to speak, at Mount Sinai, that they hadn't seen either. So that generation had gone, and the people who are now alive were people who hadn't experienced it, and there was no one now to turn to say, well, do you remember this story? There's no one to turn to, so you had to now believe. Our belief is a bigger test, okay?
When this generation was kids, they didn't experience the one in the desert or no?
We'll experience something.
Yes, I suppose so. Yes, but they didn't see the crossing of the Red Sea, and they didn't see the plagues. Well, I don't know. Well, you ask some. I'm sure someone will find some sort of physical explanation about. Yes, in the desert they have these things that just appears. Okay, all right. Now, so what happened to them? Next paragraph. At that point, we're carrying on the story, right? Because once that generation has come, you understand why we're going back in the story. Just give us a picture. Yeshua sent them away, everyone went home, they behaved, so long as Yeshua was alive, they were alive, and the bad starts in when that generation was gone, and it's all a matter of believe what I say, what I heard from my father, who was there, but I didn't actually see it myself. The children of Israel did that which was evil in the eyes of Hashem. And they worshipped the Baal. Now, Baal really means owner, right? Baal Habayis is the owner of the house. Baal is a husband, right? Baal Milchama means a man of war. Baal Koreh, you mentioned, Ari, right? Is the person who's in charge. So the boss, he's the guy who reads from the Torah, right? The guy who's in charge, he's the Baal, okay? But a god can also be called a Baal because he's in charge, okay? Baalim in the plural means different types of gods. Baal Zavuv, that's you know what that is? The Lord of the Flies. That comes from? It's the name of the book, no? Right. So later on in Malachim base, one of the gods that the Philistines worship is Baal Zavuv, the Lord of the Flies. Okay? And you can have Baal this and all different sorts of gods of different nations, and they worship them all.
But it was also like the Baal, right?
Well, I don't know. It says it in the plural. Included in that. But all the different Baalim, all of them. And they forsook, that means they left God, the God of their forefathers, Hamotzi Otam, who took them out from the land of Egypt, Vayelchu, and they went, acharei Elohim acherim, after other gods. Me Elohei ha'amim, of the gods of the people, asher svivotehem, that lived around them. The gods of Midian, the gods of Moab, the gods of Amalek, the gods of Canaan, the gods of Oran. Vayishtachavu lahem, vayishtach means they prostrated to them, vayachisu es Hashem, and they angered God. Vayazvu es Hashem, and they forsook God. We said that already, didn't we? We said at the beginning of Pasuk Yud Beis. Vayavdu leBaal, and they served Baal. What we said about the Pasuk Yud Aleph.
Baalim.
Well, doesn't Baalim include Baal?
That's what I would say. So,
Yeah, so therefore it's strange.
Yes.
Vela Ashtarot, and to Ashtarot. What's the new one? Vayicharav Hashem, and God got angry. But you get angry in Pasuk Yud Beis.
No, wait. That's what I wanted to ask you. Like, why is it?
That's why I'm asking you. It's one of the questions on the paper here. Right? What is going on over here? What are the stages? Right? So let's analyze it again slowly. It says, listen carefully, according to the Malbim, there's a very, very clear line of what we call Aveira Goreres Aveira, which means one sin leads to another sin, going from light to worse. The Gemara says, the Yetzer Hara doesn't come to you and tell you, go and serve Avodah Zarah. No, today he says, stay in bed a few minutes longer. Tomorrow he tells you, you don't really have to put tefillin on every day. Oh, well, you try your best. And the next day he tells you, well, kashrus is for when you're at home, but in the street, you can be lenient. Look, it's only Rabbana, you don't have to wait so many hours, right? And then one thing leads to another, and then it becomes eventually becomes Avodah Zarah. Just one thing leads to another. So the Malbim says you can see here the same line, but you have to look carefully to see the line. The first is, what did it say? Yeah, so they did that which was bad. That's the first thing, which means they didn't keep the mitzvot. They spoke Lashon Hara, they didn't eat kashrus, they didn't keep Shabbos, right? That's the first thing. The next thing is Vayavdu es Habarim. It's not one thing. You read it as if they did that which was evil in the eyes of God by serving the Baalim. No, it's two things. Vayasu b'nei Rabbeinu Hashem. What's bad in the eyes of God? Anyone who doesn't put tcheles on their tzitzit. I should have said that, right? Anyone who doesn't wear tefillin, right? That's bad in the eyes of God, right? Or if you don't give tzedakah, or you don't pray, those are all bad. But that's how it starts. Now, you would have thought that serving Baalim is like at the end of the line. But it's not really true. Explain it like this. It depends how much you take God out of your life. Because you can have a concept called shituf. Shituf, you've ever heard of a Hanukkah bush?
Fortunately.
Yeah? Hanukkah bush?
Christmas.
Christmas
card.
Well, what's you call it?
Christmas card.
What is a Hanukkah bush? A guy who has a Hanukkah bush in his house, does he believe in God or does he believe in Yoshki? Yoshki is the way Ashkenazim call Jesus.
He probably doesn't believe in anything. He just wants to like whatever culture.
He lives in a JC culture.
Well, he goes to synagogue on the high holidays. His son has a bar mitzvah in the temple, right? He eats gefilte fish on Friday night. You telling me he's not Jewish? He doesn't believe in God? What do you mean? He has a Bible and no New Testament stuff, a real Jewish Bible there. He said that's what he believes in. But he certainly brought, what do you say, JC culture, right? Okay, so this guy over here, says the Malbim, hasn't thrown God out of his life, right? He's just brought something else into his life. A little bit of this. That's why it's in the plural. He's not, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of this, a bit of that.
Assimilation.
Yes, so that's why it's Baalim. He's not like found a new religion, God forbid, right? He's Jewish with a lot of other things in his life. Right? That's why it's Baalim in the plural, and that's why it's the next stage after not keeping the mitzvahs, he brings into Christian, Shinto, Hindu, Islam into his life too. The next stage is to push God away. Vayazvu es Hashem, well, yes, sort of. Hashem Elokei, the God of their forefathers, other gods, of the other nations around them, they brought all that in. I think this is really an elaboration of the second stage that we talked about before, bringing all the different ones, not one particular one. And they bow down to them. That's the next thing. It's one thing to have a Hanukkah bush. I have a menorah, I have a Hanukkah bush, right? I have a Seder night, I also have Easter bunnies, right? And chocolates, whatever they do, I don't know, right? Okay? But then there comes a point when you start going to church, right? That's already the next stage, right? They actually bow down to them. That already angers God. That angers God. But they've still got Judaism in their lives. The next stage, when God is thrown out altogether, like Yazu es Hashem, and they forsook God, means they threw him out altogether. See, beforehand it says they forsook God as being their unique relationship, because it doesn't just say they forsook God, it says they forsook God who was the God of their forefathers. It means they didn't throw God out altogether. It just means that super relationship that we had with God, who was the God of our forefathers, it's just him and us. Then they said, no, it's okay to bring other things in as well. Now they threw God out altogether. Vayaz with Hashem, that's what it says. What do they do now? You have to find a new religion. What was their new religion? The new one was Baal and Ashtaroth. It wasn't any Baal, all the Baals. No, they adopted a new religion, which was the neighbors, the Canaanite Baal. Not any Baal, Baal of the Canaanites. That's why it's in the singular. It's much more serious than it was. And then God got really angry. That's possible. Yichar af Hashem, which means the anger of God burnt strongly. Af is anger. Well, af, what does af really mean?
Nose.
A nose, right? It's used in the context of anger. Yeah, but it's used in the context of anger because the nose is associated with anger, as you all know from the cartoons of the angry bull. That's nose goes, right, flares up, right? Because it's probably something true about it, right? And you see smoke coming out the guy's nose. That's what Yichar af Hashem. That's how angry God is, right? At this point, it's got to the point that God says this is really bad. Yes.
How come we say like there's unbroken connection from us to, and it sounds like...
No, I explain. That's a very, very good question. It doesn't mean everybody was like that. If I had asked you today, are the Jews in Israel religious? Well, there's hundreds of yeshivas, tens of thousands of yeshiva bochrim, but unfortunately there are hundreds of thousands of people who don't keep Shabbos, right? So there's no unbroken tradition. We have a tradition, but unfortunately we can't say that about most Jews. So it doesn't have to be even most, understand? In the times of Ezra, there was a big outcry about intermarriage. If you look at the numbers, it's about 0.5%. And as a big outcry, an enormous gathering of the Jewish people in Jerusalem, we've got to put a stop to this outrageous outmarriage, right? So if you read a story without analyzing the numbers, you must say, it must be 10%, 20%, 60%, like 70% like it is today in America. No, it's tiny. But that's also bad. So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't say everybody was like that. Just because was very upset because there was a certain percentage like that, and the other people were less, and some people maybe didn't bother them, and there's no outrage at it, so it could be that's why we're all held responsible for it, right? Okay. Vayazu, let's carry on. Vayichar Hashem Yisrael, and God very annoyed with it. I should point out, though I don't know the answers to this, you'll notice if you read carefully, you probably didn't notice, that the word for the children of Israel keeps changing. There's two ways to talk about the children of Israel. You can say the word Bnei Yisrael, or you can say There's actually lots of it. You can say Yisrael, Kol Bnei Yisrael. There's also different variations, but the basic difference between the word Yisrael and Am. Generally, it's understood to mean that Yisrael are the elite, those who you expect a better behavior from, those who are learned, those who are Talmidei Chachamim, or the tribe of Levi. It's somebody who is held to a higher standard, and Am means the plebs, means the general masses who people are not so educated. They probably go to shul, but they never had a yeshiva education. That's what it means. Yes, that's what it usually means. Again, the distinction doesn't have to be precise, but it's there to make that type of distinction. At one point it could be that's the distinction, and one point it's that way, but it's the same major difference between the two groups. And you'll see it keeps changing in the text. It could be usually because God's anger is directed at those who should know better. Not those, God's not angry because all these chilonim in Tel Aviv who not educated and don't know better, right? He's angry with people like us who don't care about those people in Tel Aviv and don't do anything about it, right? Because we should know better. You get it? That's very clear, the story. I have to tell you this. If you're in Aish, you have to know there's Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos brings at the time of the destruction of the first temple, that God sent the angel of death. This is a Gemara I must have heard 50 times from Reb Noach Weinberg, right? You'll see why in a second, right? He sent the angel of death to write a letter tov, on the foreheads of a certain group of people. So the angels asked God, don't ask me philosophical questions, here to the end of the story and you hear the point, right? The angels of God asked, why are you writing tov on their foreheads? He says, those people are to, remember it? Those people are to be saved from the destruction of the temple. So the angel said, why are these people better than everybody else? So God said, because these people are tzaddikim gemurim. These are righteous people. And all the other people are Rishayim. That's why these deserve to die and these deserve to save. So the angel said to God, but these tzaddikim didn't do anything about it. They knew these other people were Rishayim and they just carried on life as if they didn't do anything. So God said, yeah, but it wouldn't have helped. Even if they got up there and shouted at them and told them off, it wouldn't have helped. The Rishayim still would have done it. And therefore, they're not held to blame. The angel said to God, you know it wouldn't help. They didn't know it wouldn't help. They weren't prophets. They didn't know it wouldn't help. And God said, you're right, 100%. And therefore the angel of death should go and kill them first. Because they deserve their worst. Now, what does that mean? The angels need to teach God? I know that's a philosophical question, right? You'll ask Rabbi Leader. I don't know. The point of the story teaches us, says Reb Noach, right? That those who would tzaddikim, what God called at the beginning tzaddikim gemurim, right? The point of the story is to teach us this whole story. They may look like tzaddikim gemurim to you, but if they know there's other people and they know there's a chance that they could affect them. Now the truth is these are obviously really bad because God said it wouldn't have helped, right? But you don't know it wouldn't have helped and you're obligated to try your best even if it might not help, even if you're almost convinced it won't help, but you don't know, and if you don't, you're held to blame. And that's why you see often that God's annoyed with Israel, even though it's the Am who are the ones who are doing the sins. You'll see that through to that. Anyway,
the Am does something wrong and Hashem got angry with Israel.
Right. Because Israel are the ones who are supposed to know and they should have educated them or done something or be upset about it or protest or do something. Don't just sit back and carry on. They call it tzaddikim pelts. You know what tzaddikim pelts is? Tzaddikim pelts is a Yiddish expression. Pelts means a fur coat. So if you imagine going down a very, very cold street in Poland somewhere where it's, right? So everyone's got their fur coats on and people put their coats and they're wrapped up like this in a fur coat. So a tzaddik in pelts is like a tzaddik. It's nice and warm for him. And it's unfortunate that everybody else is cold, but what can you do? I'm warm and I'm okay. So that's an expression about a tzaddik who's sort of a tzaddik but doesn't really do anything, teach anybody or educate or try to help other people and make them full. He's only happy with himself. I'm not saying that there are tzaddikim like that because that's not a real tzaddik like you see from this story, right? But it may look like that, right? And a real tzaddik is someone who is concerned and tries his best or davens for them or help, does something, whatever you can do. All right, let's continue. So Hashem is angry with Yisrael. Okay? A yitnei. Okay. So now, how does God react when he's angry? So he wants to give them a message. Okay? But the message goes in stages. Because God doesn't want to, give a strong message if a weak message will be enough. Okay, so as the messages don't get listened to, the message gets harsher and harsher. You read the Parsha's B'chukoysa where God has the whole Teichecha, where God tells him, if you don't listen to me, you'll get this, and it gets worse and worse and worse till you have eventually destruction, war, exile, but that's the end of the story. Okay, so let's see if we can analyze the story, how the God's warning or message or punishment, if you want to call it, right, which what it really is a warning message to them. It gets more and more severe as their actions become more and more severe. Right? This is not one particular story. This is the whole cycle of action over the next 350 years that the Jews are in the book of Shoftim. There's an introduction to the whole story. Vayitneim b'yad shosim, and he gave them into the hands of attackers. Vayashosu oisam, so they attacked them. Now that doesn't mean that they won war, they lost wars. It just means when you get attacked, like a terrorist attack, right? A terrorist attack doesn't mean we don't control the place, doesn't mean we don't have an army, it doesn't mean we're not in charge. It just means that they're brazen enough to come in and risk their lives, and they may even be suicide bombers and they're going to die at it, right? But they still do it, right? And we suffer terribly from them, even though we're actually much stronger than them, and we're actually in control, and we could go in there and blast them to bits, but we don't, okay? That's the point. This is the first stage where people are coming and biting, taking money, taking property, burning a house down here, but they're not some organized army that is defeating us in battle. That's the first stage. But if we don't take that warning, then God says, oh, let's turn up the heat and see if they take the next warning. Because that's the first stage. What do they do? They attack them. Next stage, and they were sold biyad oiveyem into the hands of their enemies. Clearly that's another stage. That means when the enemies are in control, and when you're sold to someone, they own you. Instead of you owning them, they own you. You can own someone, he can make life difficult for you. But now they own you. And they were not able la'amod lifnei them in face of their enemies. I'm not sure if that's the second stage or a third stage or the same as the second stage. They had enemies, they weren't able to stand up to them, means the enemies defeated them. Then, the next stage is in Pasuk Tezvav. Whenever they went out, Yad Hashem hoysabam l'ra, the hand of Hashem was against them for evil. You see, when you lose, that doesn't necessarily mean God's against you. He's just not helping you. If you have enemies which outnumber you 1 to 10, and you win, God's obviously on your side. If you lose, that just means God, I'm not helping you. But if you lose when you outnumber them 10 to 1, then obviously God's got it against you. And that's the third stage. That the punishment became that God actually was against them. So they even lost when they should have won. Right? That's the point. Wherever they went out, Yad Hashem hoysabam l'ra, the hand of God was against them to their detriment. Hashem, just like God had spoken, means if you look in the book of Moses, you'll see that God predicts that if you serve Avodah Zarah, as it gets worse and worse and worse in your actions, you get worse and worse and worse in the punishment. Hashem, as God had sworn to them, and then at some point it became very yetzer. What does that word mean?
Yetzer.
Distress.
Distress, very good. It became very distressed. It's actually the word tsar, which means not pain. Don't make the mistake again. Tsar means pain. Tsar means narrow. Kala olam kulai gesher tsar ma'od means it's a very narrow bridge. So when things are very narrow and there's a lot of pressure against you, this is what they felt. So it's telling there came a point when they were in great distress. At that point they would turn to God, and God would say, okay, now you turn to me, well, I'll help you.
So he does this
at the point that they're under terrible stress and they call out to him. So at that point, Vayakam Hashem, this is what Hashem would establish for them, Shoftim. That is, literally means judges. What does it mean? A guy who goes with a hammer, gavel, and goes bang, 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 and then... No, it means a person who is a leader. That's what it means. It could be they judge them as well, but that's not really the point. And judge might not mean judge between man and man, it means between them and God. It means they told them off and told them what to do and guided them and directed them, took them out to battle and built so they should be better. But first of all, they had to get a point where it was painful. If anyone's been to a 12-step program, right, you have to hit rock bottom first and realize there's nobody else who's going to save you. Then you can start climbing. That was the same story, right? But when they got to the point, not that I've ever been to one of these things, but my wife is quite happy for me to tell you that she goes to one for Overeaters Anonymous, and therefore it's absolutely fine. She says it's okay, I can tell you all, and she very encourages people who do need it to go to it. It can change their life. Okay? So when you get to the point where you've got no one else to turn to, then you turn to God. That's what I'm over here. Okay? When they were not just suffering from their enemies, not just that their enemies defeated them, even with the best army in the world, they lost to their enemies. Right? And that made no sense. At that point it became so bad they turned to God. God said, you good? I'll send you a new leader and he'll be charismatic and he'll lead you and he'll encourage you and you become better. That's what happened. Now, this is just a summary of the whole book. And so he sent new leaders, and they saved them from those who came to attack them. Okay, now we have a bit of a strange sort of two ways to see it. Continue like this. The Gamel Shofteim lo Shamei, they didn't listen to their judges either. I don't know, because people misbehave. People have a Yetzer Hara. You heard of that thing called the Yetzer Hara?
No, but they, these judges weren't they supposed to, appeal to...
Correct. Well, once the Jews always listened to Moshe Rabbeinu, no, they didn't always listen to him. They served the golden calf, and they complained about the man, and then people misbehave. People have Yetzer Hara. I know you're a big tzaddik, it's hard for you to understand, right?
No.
But that's the reality, even good people. So even though they went through some process of they turned to God, and God sent them leaders, and they didn't listen to their leaders. So they're back in the same cycle again, right? Let's see, let's carry on. We're going to read it all first. They didn't listen to their leaders either. Ki zanu acharei Elohim achim. Now, ki means ayi. What I mean to say is, what does it mean they listened to the leaders? Zanu means to go astray. Right? Which is what a zayna is. What's a zayna? A hot prostitute, because she makes people go astray. Understand? That's why she's the same word.
Is that connected to sun, to nourish?
It might be, but it's unlikely, because they don't really nourish anything. Right? No, it's probably women who are zana. But there may be a connection historically, because usually the motel where people got nourishment also had a zayna in it. Possibly, right? But I don't think the zayna nourishes you in the sense of her job as a zayna. Just she has another job which she gives you food to eat. I don't think. Anyway, here it's very straightforward. It means to go astray. They would go astray acharei Elohim acherim, after the other gods, and they would bow down to them. So sort of going back to stage number 2. Before we had really 3 or 4 stages. We didn't keep the mitzvahs. We then had our Hanukkah bush. Then we went to church, and then we took on we converted. Right? That was like the 4 stages. So here we're saying, even during the life when they had charismatic good leaders, from guys who inspired them, they still went back to stage 2 and stage 3. Yeah, it says here, and they bowed to them. It doesn't say they went to stage 4. Right? They didn't give up Judaism altogether, but they still misbehaved behind closed doors. Maher Saru, they turned away Maher very quickly because it's very soon after this guy's taken leadership. And okay, originally, it was great. But quickly means quickly after the pressure was off. The pressure was on, the Jews were pressured back against the wall. God, please help us. Right? And then God sets a leader, everything's fine, he's saved from their enemies, and very quickly they're back to their old ways as soon as the pressure's off. Right, you know the story about the guys looking for the parking lot? Yeah, you know the story, right? A guy's looking for a park, he's going round and round, and he's got this very, very important meeting, he's got to be there on time, and he's got to say, God, please help me. And just then, someone pulls out, and he goes, God, it's okay, I managed on my own, right? So that's the story. When you need God, then you call to God, and as soon as everything's fine, we're back to our old back behavior, because we haven't really internalized the point. We just under pressure, turn to God. But God says, okay, even under pressure, you'll still send someone. But because it wasn't so serious, our tshuva, and that's why as soon as the pressure was off, we went back to it, then what happened? Which their forefathers had gone, means the right way. Lishma mitzvah Hashem, who did listen to the commandments of God, they didn't do that. Now we've got a very strange passage. Parshat Yud. No, guys, Parshat Yud. When God established for them leaders, which is what we did in the previous verse 15, God was with the shofet. And saved them from their enemies. All the days of the shofet. But why? You just told me the Jews misbehave. So why are you saving them? Shouldn't you say, if during the lifetime of the shofet they misbehaved, then we'll go back to being difficult? No. As long as the shofet's alive, we save them. That's what it sounds like. So the Malbim says, he knows this because he's learned the whole of the Shoftim, right? And he's analysed all the Shoftim, and you'll see that there's different types of Shoftim periods. Sometimes it was glorious. It was exceptionally, during the whole time of the life of the Shofet, everything was great. For example, we'll see Devorah, Osniel ben Kenaz. There's some Shoftim who things were great. As soon as the Shoftim came in control, the people behaved, followed his ways, and then during the whole life of that shofet, it was great. When he died, so then the influence was there, and people would go back to their old ways. Okay? But there were others who would, even during their time, the people didn't listen to them, which is what we described in the previous verse. And in those times, it was always difficult. For example, Shimshon. We'll get to Shimshon later on. Even though he was a shofet, but they still suffered the whole during his lifetime from the Philistines. They were always attacking. So he saved them, and they attacked. He saved them again, and they attacked again. So some Shoftim, it was glorious, 40, 80 years, peace, and it was great. Other times, it was continuously, during the lifetime of the shofet, back and forth. And the reason is, would depend on the people's behavior. If the people listened to the shofet, then everything went well. And they were behaved well, everything went for them. God, it was peaceful during the whole lifetime. If they didn't listen, right, then it didn't go so well for them. And that's why these two verses are describing completely different scenarios. And that's what's repeating them. It starts off like this. The shofet would be there, and God would save them from their attackers. But if they didn't listen to the shofet during his lifetime, then you had that was one type of period. Then it says Parshat Shoftim, and there were other times when God established the shofet, and it was during the whole time of the shofet he saved them. That's because there was a different leadership. Now I think the reason why they got different leadership, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they didn't listen, it depends on the level of tshuva. We mentioned at the beginning, why did they do tshuva? Because the pressure was on. If that was the only reason, just temporary because the pressure was on, so then as soon as the pressure was off, they went back to their old ways, and then it became difficult again. But if there was a sincere tshuva, then they got a shofet who led them for many, many years, and then they were successful all that time. All right? That's what Pasuk Yud Ches is describing. Ki yinachem Hashem, because God, yinachem, really means to reconsider. That's what it really means. How do you translate it?
Like rest. Like
No, there's two words. Nach means to rest. This is from lenachem. The mem is a root letter here. Nun ches mem. Now we usually say lenachem means to comfort. Like you go to someone who's mourning. You do nichum avelim. It doesn't mean to rest. No, that's word nacha. Nun ches hey. It's nun ches mem, which means to comfort. But really doesn't mean comfort. It really means to reconsider. You see, at the end of Parshat Bereshis, it says God was yinachem, that he created man. It doesn't mean he was comforted that he created man. On the contrary, it means he reconsidered. This was a really bad idea, creating man, right? Because he just messes up. I'm going to destroy the world. But the word used there is yinachem. It doesn't mean why was he comforted? On the grounds he was upset. It means he reconsidered. Now, when you go to someone who's mourning, you're actually getting him to reconsider his situation. You're not trying to tell that he should think about the football scores or the weather. You're not trying to distract him from what's happened. You want him to see what's happened in a better light. That he shouldn't be totally destroyed or broken at what's happened. You see, if life comes to an end when people die, that's what it is. That's really soul-destroying. That's really destructive. And that's why people are really sad. If you understand this is just a temporary thing, and it's just a matter of time before we'll get together again, so that you can reconsider and be comforted. That's why we're actually going to get them to reconsider. So what it says over here, God reconsidered. God had punishment, sent them an enemy, and then because of under so much stress and pain, he reconsidered it and took them out of that situation. Yinachem Hashem. You could ask me, what do you mean God reconsidered? You didn't think about it in the first place. That's just an expression. It doesn't mean really reconsider. It's just we using that expression about God, right? When God does something that makes us look like he was reconsidering it. That's just the word. It's called an anthropomorphism, right? To talk about God in human terms. Okay? All right. May na'akasam, from their cry. Na'aka is crying out. Not crying with tears. That's bechi. When you cry out, there's lots of different words you use. One of them is na'aka. Now it's interesting. Hebrew, it's one of the reasons why Hebrew is called, the Hebrew language is called the holy language, is because it has, according to Nachmanides, this is the reason, because it's developed many, many different words for very similar holy concepts. For example, Eskimos have 40 different words for snow, right? And Romans have 20 different words for javelins, right? Because one's a long one, one's a skinny one, one's got a weight at the end. Why do they have to have so many words? Because since it's so much part of their lives, you can't have a whole paragraph to describe what you want. Right? You have to have a very precise word to say exactly what type of javelin you want. Or you talk about the snow. Well, what type of snow is it? Is it heavy snow, light snow? So you have to have a word. So British people don't need snow. I'll explain it to you over 2 sentences. But Eskimos have to be very, very precise because it's their whole life. So in Jews, what their whole life is about Kedusha. That's what life is about. So you have to have very, very precise words for the different types of Kedusha you're trying to describe. So we have in Kaddish, Yiskadel, V'yiskadesh, V'yispoar, V'yisremam, V'yisnaseh, V'yishadar, V'yisaleh, V'yishalal. And they all mean the same thing, don't they? They all mean God should be Allah Akbar, right? They just mean God should be great. Right? Isn't that what they mean? No, but we have 10 different nuanced, slightly different words to describe the same thing. It's not exactly the same, but they're nuanced, right? So the same thing is prayer. There are 10 different words for prayer in Hebrew. One of them is na'aka. I know Rabbi Shimshon Pincus has got a whole book called Shari Tefillah, in which he describes the exact meaning of each of the 10 different words for prayer. Okay? There's actually 10 different words for simcha as well.
Tanug.
Sosain, simcha, gila, rina, ditza, chedva, right? There's different words. We got time for a story? Yeah. Who's heard of Moses Mendelssohn? It's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. I mean, it doesn't. But you'll see how it's related. Right? Heard of Moses Mendelssohn? Never heard of it? Oh. Moses Mendelssohn was the founder of the Reform movement. Well, yes, sort of. He was a technically religious Jew who lived in Berlin, right? And his philosophy was to be Jewish at home and to be a German in the street. Okay, at the time that's all it was, you understand? But it was what led to, that's why technically he was religious. Right? He probably ate kosher food, his wife probably went to the mikveh, right? But he considered himself of Germans of the Mosaic persuasion. It means our primary definition is Germanic. Our religion is the law of Moses, right? As opposed to our primary definition is we are Jews of the Jewish faith who happen to be German and faithful German citizens. In his mind, it was the other way around. Their primary definition was German.
So
Unfortunately,
they identify as German, and then at home they'll identify with Jewish.
Yeah, right. And they would probably keep halacha, right? But they identified, right? And the problem when there was a conflict, and therefore they tried to make everything more and more German and whatever. Okay, so Moses Mendelssohn was very famous. He wrote a commentary, a German commentary on the Chumash called the Biur, which Rabbi Hirsch claims. You see the brief in the book, right? Because Rabbi Hirsch also, like 40, 50 years later, also wrote a translation in German. And Rabbi Hirsch's students, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch's students, asked him, why do you think that the rabbis of the time will accept your translation when they banned Mendelssohn's translation? I mean, when Mendelssohn came out with his translation, although he was actually like Orthodox originally, the rabbis at the time put his sefer out and banned it. So he explained the difference. The purpose of Mendelssohn's translation was to expose German Jews to the beauty of the German language. It means the Germans at the time of Mendelssohn could read Chumash. They knew what the Chumash was saying, but they didn't know German. I mean, you have to understand, in Germany there are two types of German. There's simple German and there's Hochdeutsch, which is what fancy Dutch. A German which the fancy books are written in, and like the German classics are written in this type of German. Most Jews couldn't speak that. They could speak Yiddish, which is more or less the same language, right? But they couldn't read German classics like Goethe. They couldn't read that. So the purpose of Mendelssohn's translation was to expose Jews to the beauty of the German language. So they could then understand through the Chumash the German language. To do that, you have to translate the Chumash into German. Rabbi Hirsch says the point of my translation is to expose the German Jews to the beauty of the Chumash. Because they didn't know Chumash anymore, that they spoke German by his time. Understand? Now they speak beautiful German, but didn't understand the Chumash. So by translating the Chumash into beautiful German, I can then show you what the Chumash is about. And that's why he felt that his Chumash was completely different. And it's not just because, obviously it's a different translation when you've got a different point. When your message is different, then you get a different message. Anyway, getting back to the story. Rabbi Mendelssohn, Moses Mendelssohn, wanted to see the Vilna Gaon. He knew, right? The Vilna Gaon was seen by people, even, like you say, you can compare it to modern Orthodox, so it's not so strange that a person just wanted to go and see Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Who doesn't want to see the angel of the Malach, right? Wants to get an audience with Rabbi Shemaiah, right? But knowing his background and his books, he knew he wouldn't have been allowed in. Because he was known as a writer of these shaky books. So he made up a whole story that he was an Italian rabbi who had to deal with a theological debate. With the Christians in Italy, that was a common thing, and he wanted the Vilna Gaon's help to answer the questions. So the Vilna Gaon says, no problem. So he got an audience with the Vilna Gaon. Actually, he had to travel all the way to Germany, all the way to Lithuania to do that, which is a long way. He came in, and he's got a whole list of 60 questions. So the Vilna Gaon says, tell me your questions. And he says, this is the whole list. Read the whole list of questions first. So the Vilna Gaon, this is the way the story's being told. The Vilna Gaon says, question 1, 15, 32, and 37 are all the same question, right? And basically he worded down the questions like 3 or 4 questions, all basically the same questions, 4 or 5 different questions. He tells me the answers, and then he says, I want to ask you a question. Okay. How many words for simcha are there? That's why I'm telling you the story. Why do you want to know the words of simcha? Because there's 10 words for simcha, there's 10 words for prayer, and that's the word na'aka, which is written over here. That's the only connection to this chapter. Okay? But it's a good excuse for a story. Yeah? How many words for simcha are there? So he said there's 9 words. There's 9 words for simcha in Tanakh. So the Vilna Gaon said to him, but Rashi says 10. He said, but everyone knows that Rashi's wrong. The Vilna Gaon turned away, and he told he says, take this guy out and put him in the stocks. You know what stocks are? No, not stock room. The stocks.
With the animals on
No. You know what stocks are? You're British, you know what they are?
Yeah, your arms.
Right, so he knows. But we went to the same, had the same education. It's what we used to do in the Middle Ages, when they didn't like somebody, they would put your arms through a wooden thing, would keep your arms stick, and everyone would come past you, throw rotten apples at you and eggs, and that was. So apparently there was such a thing in Vilna. I mean, the Jews in Vilna had enough, what's the word? Autonomy, and autonomy to be able to do that. The Polish didn't care. You don't want to don't do it to the Polish, you do it to the Jews, right? A Jew who misbehaved, who needed, they couldn't put them in prison. They didn't have prisons, right? Jewish prisons. They couldn't, punish them like Beis Din would want to do, but that they could do, right? Put them in the stock. So everyone on his way to Mincha, between Mincha and Maya, would throw rotten eggs at them, spit at them, because they deserved to be shamed in public. This is what the Gaon said to Moses and Mendel. And that's what they did. They put him in the stocks, right? And why? Apparently from the story, it's clear that Vilna Gaon immediately knew who this guy was. He didn't take him his time. He was just trying to get him, right? He also knew from one of Moses Mendelssohn's works, which you've probably read, that he disagreed with this Rashi on how many words for simcha are, right? But what he felt was that this was chutzpah. To disagree with Rashi is okay. But it's like, everybody knows that Rashi is a mistake, right? Yeah, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but it has to be done with respect. And that's disrespect for rabbis is a serious offense. The Vilna Gaon turned away because he didn't want to look at him anymore. He didn't want to face this guy who was a Russia. But listen to the end of the story. Mendelssohn's supposed to have said the whole thing was worth the embarrassment just to see the face of the Vilna Gaon. You're right? So he was a from guy at heart. Understand? To see the face of the Vilna Gaon was worse than this whole public embarrassment.
He said that?
That's what they say he said.
That's what they say.
Look, I said the whole story, that's what they say. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But it would make sense. It's a nice ending to the story. You wouldn't put up with that to see the face of the Vilna Gaon.
No,
You don't know.
I don't.
The Baal Shem Tov. Okay, the Baal Shem Tov.
Yeah.
You would. Oh, say that. Okay, say that.
My story.
Okay, but say it's the same thing. That's a Hasidic story, this is a Litvish story. But say it's the same story, just a different version. All right.
Yeah.